Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. If you've been following the BWJ reading plan closely, you would have concluded, yes, the longest chapter, not only in the Psalm, but in the entire Bible. And Psalm 119 concluded with the verse 176. I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek your servant, for I have not forgotten your commandments. So that was the last verse from yesterday's reading, and how we can echo the words of the psalmist with grateful hearts to Jesus, the great shepherd of our souls. Well, yes, as Uncle Henry has said, today we're moving on to a special group of psalms, and yes, known as Songs of Ascent, Psalm 120 to 134. So altogether 15 of them. We'll read and reflect on just the first 4 today. They're all relatively short, just like the choruses, which we can easily sing from memory. I would really love to hear some of this sang in the Hebrew language. Singing is such a wonderful means of expressing and bringing out the deep feelings of the human heart, isn't it? And as we read the Psalm this season, may the words of the Psalms order our emotional life rightly, even as we go through different situations in life. So for context, not just for the first 4 Psalms, I think basically the context applies to all of the 15 Psalms. I'm just going to share a bit of background and a couple of pictures that might help us to appreciate how this compilation of Psalms came about. And Uncle Henry will help me with some slides. So we'll start with the first one that shows the different titles for this group of Psalms. So in my Bible, all of them says, they have a little subtitle at the beginning of the Psalm, and it says a Song of Ascent. Yeah, and as you can see, there are actually many different titles. Maybe even in your Bible it says something else. So for example, it's also referred to as the gradual Psalms, the songs of degrees, songs of steps, pilgrim songs, or just simply songs for going up to worship. In Hebrew, they are known as the Aliyah Psalms. In the Hebrew language, when we say we make an aliyah, it means that we go up toward God, or more simply, to rise, to ascend. Okay, and then we'll take a look at the second slide. The next, this slide actually has this Hebrew phrase. I'm not even sure if I can pronounce it correctly. Shir Ham Alof. Shir Ham Alof. All those titles that we saw just now help to convey the meaning of this phrase. The first word shir simply means a hymn or a song. And the second word, ma'ala, means both a step or stair and going up. So there's that meaning of rising, step or stair. I've chosen this picture, keep it in mind, because, it's a picture, to me, it's a picture of an upward journey that is not one of even steps or regular steps, like the way we're so used to having our staircases, you can, you don't really have to look and you can just automatically go. But with a kind of steps like this, you certainly have to focus and have determination and effort. Yeah, otherwise you miss your step. And I think this is such an accurate picture of our spiritual life as well, right? It's not always the same all the time. We go through different situations, and we just have to really focus. So in the Bible, the phrase going up is often used to refer to going up to Jerusalem, which is situated on a hill. So in the next slide, you will see the topography of the ancient road from Jericho to Jerusalem. I don't know if it's clear on your device or your screen, but it's about a 20 mile or 20 kilometer? Anyway, something like that. It's an ascending road, yeah? And that was the last journey that Jesus made before the crucifixion. As he and his disciples traveled to Jerusalem. So that's what happens. Most scholars believe that these psalms of ascent were sung by the pilgrims or the worshippers as they ascended the road to arrive in Jerusalem to attend 3 major festivals each year. And in the next slide, it will show us more clearly the Judean terrain, the Judean hills. Yeah. So you imagine echoing these hills, echoing with the pilgrim songs as the peoples flowed in from different directions, different towns, villages in Judea, possibly Samaria too. And then they're singing together on the roads and the country paths. And what are they singing? What are they thinking? Well, they're recalling the great events in their history. And actually, this is something, the festivals, the 3 festivals is something that God has commanded for them to do. And it's recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. And I think most of you will know what these 3 major festivals are. Again, different names, but the first one is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we also know as Passover. So I suppose the children of Israel would remember, their hasty departure from Egypt that night, and when God had performed all these great miracles to deliver them out of slavery. And then the second festival is exactly 7 weeks after the Passover. This is an agricultural celebration. I suppose a Thanksgiving too, for the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Later on, this Feast of Weeks, it is called. It is also called Pentecost, by the way. So later, this celebration has become associated with the remembrance of the law, the Torah, the law of Moses, that God gave to him on Mount Sinai. So 50 days after the Passover. Then the third celebration is called the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, this is a celebration that helps them to remember the children of Israel. They were wandering around in the desert for 40 years. And what did they have? I mean, they weren't farming. They were traveling. But so that meant that they had to rely on God for food, for protection. And so, so these are the things that they will be remembering as they sing the Psalms, as they go up to celebrate on the different occasions. So we might say, who composed the Psalms? Actually, there are 15 of them. Apparently, 4 are attributed to King David. We'll be doing one of them today. And then 1 that's attributed to King Solomon, his son, just 1. The rest, about 10 of them, anonymous. Don't know who composed them. And it is unlikely that the composers of these psalms originally composed them with this in mind, that traveling songs. But anyway, later, these 15 psalms were just compiled and grouped together for use in traveling towards Jerusalem for the annual pilgrimages. Okay, I'd just like to show you one more slide. In this slide, there are, let me see. Oops, sorry. This is the topography again, we see the cross-section. Then the next one, Uncle Henry, the one with the Temple Mount on your left. Yeah, so we talk about the one on the left. This is a drawing of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And we can imagine, yeah, as the pilgrims arrived from the lower part, and as they lifted up their eyes and saw the place, and it must have been a wondrous, wondrous sight. Imagine you've been traveling for days, yeah, and that sense of, arrival, a sense of, yeah, there is a destination and I'm getting there in time for the celebration. That must have been a wonderful feeling. Then on your right, this is a photo of what is called the Southern Steps, which apparently were discovered in quite recent times during some excavations. And it is almost certain that the pilgrim worshippers entered the temple from these steps. Okay, now bear that in mind, because according to some tradition, the Jewish priests and possibly the Levite singers also sang a psalm of ascent on each step. So as they ascended the 15 steps that led from the court of women to the court of Israel, yeah, there were 15 steps. So they would sing on each step one psalm. Of course, that was before the temple was destroyed in AD 70, along with the destruction of Jerusalem. Nowadays, the practice of reciting the Psalms of ascent is emulated on these southern steps. And apparently it's a popular activity for pilgrim tours to include. Perhaps those of you who have been to Israel will confirm that. I've never done a Holy Land trip. Yeah, so have this picture in mind, whether it's those days of journeying towards Jerusalem for the feast and these songs were sung, or whether it's on the steps, in the temple. These songs must be so inspiring, isn't it? Yeah. Well, as we seek to worship God today, let us remind ourselves of what the fellow pilgrims of ancient times sang. And may the theme of each song of ascent offer us much insight and encouragement as we make our own spiritual aliyah. Okay, so with that, we will begin with the first psalm of ascent, Psalm 120. I didn't put the numbers there, almost intentionally, because, I don't think the Bible or these scriptures were written with numbers beside them. Okay, so shall we just read the first psalm? I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, O Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will he do to you, and what more besides, O deceitful tongue? He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom tree. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshach, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I'm a man of peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Yeah, so the first psalm, Psalm 120, the Psalm of Ascent, really sounds like a lamentation, isn't it? The psalmist laments. Or one could also look at it as a leaving song, where the pilgrim laments the culture of dishonesty and hostility and leaves wherever he was from for the holy city of Jerusalem. So similarly, we are not just called to flee from the lies of our culture, we are called to flee to God. In this psalm, if you know, we in our BWJ Bible, journal, I'd say that the main idea is really a lamentation song, yeah, a leaving song. And what about God's character? Well, the first line already tells us He is a God who hears, and He's a God who saves and rescues. For man's character, actually for this next few psalms, I'd rather change it to, instead of man's character, how about pilgrim's character? And in this song, it tells us that the pilgrim is a man of peace. Am I a man? Am I a woman of peace? This is something to think about. And then when it comes to application, well, I feel that the pilgrim prays to be delivered from lies. What about us? What do I want to be delivered from? Lord, rescue me. Rescue me from hasty words. Rescue me from hasty decisions, hasty actions. Lord, rescue me from the attractions and the distractions. Maybe a lot of it's lies too, right? From social media. These are some of the things that I can think of. Okay, just a short sum. That there are things that we need to leave if we were to come to God. And in the next slide, our next song, I think will be very familiar to all of you. One of my favorite psalms as well, Psalm 121, 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. What a blessing it is, isn't it? This is the main theme of this song is really about, God's providence and how we can trust in His providential care. So as the pilgrim sets out on his journey, if you cast your mind back to all those hills and the different, dangers that they might encounter, he looks up and he sees all the hills. But then he also looks beyond the hills, beyond the high places. And he knows that he can trust the one who governs heaven and earth to watch over him. So in this psalm, what do we learn about God's character? It's all there, isn't it? Our ever-ready helper, keeper, and guardian of our souls. And what about the pilgrim's character? Well, the pilgrim knows he's humble. He knows that his foot can slip any moment. Do I know my own vulnerabilities, my own weaknesses? And can I completely depend on God's protection and watch? So these are some of the thoughts. As for application, I think a lot of applications, but one that I'd like to mention is that this psalm is a wonderful blessing or benediction to pray over ourselves and others too. So it's definitely a song that is good to memorize. The The psalm was prayed over me years ago, many, many years ago. And it became such a real comfort during my time away from home. I think of the numerous times I faced hazardous situations, whether it's on the roads, whether it's in an earthquake, or being caught in the midst of social and political unrests. I think of those times and how, God was there, and I just know it. His peace was there. So I can definitely say that my help comes from the Lord. This is in verse 2. Yeah. Okay. We move on to the next slide. Psalm 122. And in your Bible, you probably have a note there that says of David. So for sure, we know that it is King David who composed this song. Okay. Psalm 122. Let's read it. He says, I rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where all the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There the thrones for judgment stand, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your city walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my brothers and friends, I will say, peace be within you. And for the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. Well, what's the main idea, theme of this song? It definitely sounds like the pilgrim has arrived. Yeah, it's an arriving song, and he arrives with that sense of joy and a prayer for Jerusalem. The pilgrim enters Jerusalem and blesses the Lord for the city's beauty and for the sense that he or she belongs there. Well, we know that the actual physical buildings, the temple, even the city was destroyed, yeah? But this song really is about a moving towards God. The pilgrims move towards God and gravitating towards the love of God in worship. And not only a private way, privately, individually, but it especially celebrates the beauty of worshiping God together with others in an ongoing way. So again, just now you remember the slide of the hills, and I was just thinking of how, wow, you never know who you meet along the way in our own walk. But there are different ones that I'm sure, as you all know, who come alongside us and whom we walk along with, some for shorter stretch of the way, some longer, and then some we are together for a long time. Yeah. But there is a wonderful sense of fellowship, right? So in this psalm, what do we learn about God's character? Well, I feel that it really shows that God is a God who is constantly in communion, the Godhead himself, Father, Son, God the Father, Jesus, who came to show how, he was in that state of constant remembering, constant perfect agreement with the Father, seeking the Father's will, spending time in prayer, in the wonderful atmosphere of the loving spirit. So in a way, it talks about, it shows us what it's like, right? God's character, the triune God. And then what about the pilgrim's character? Well, worship of God, as we said earlier, being in fellowship with others. And also, I like verse 3, it says, Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. What does that mean? It really means that we are caring so much about the unity in God's house. Very often, we may not think about it, especially, with different churches and having different kinds of problems. But again, this psalm reminds us that if we really, truly have a pilgrim heart, caring deeply about that sense of unity in God's house is a wonderful thing, and we should work towards that. Okay, we should demonstrate that. How about application? Well, application, this psalm calls people to worship together. And for us, I think in the last 2 years of pandemic, it's required us to practice distancing, to stay home. So it's, in a way, it's not been easy to come together. But then when we think about it, isn't it amazing how we have found new ways to fellowship with others meaningfully? And one of it is actually through this lunchtime devotion group on Zoom. I know we don't get to chat and all that, but then as different ones come, and I come into to listen to different ones share, it really builds, it really encourages me each time. And so what about the rest of us? I don't always have a chance to ask you, but have you other ways? Have you found other ways to build up one another in the Lord? How about sending them a couple of verses from the psalm that you read each day? Or how about making a call to people and say, can I pray with you? How can I pray for you? So in these ways, we can also express that desire. Let us go to the house of the Lord. Let us go to the house of the Lord. This is what King David, in his first verse says. Okay, then we move on to the last of today's psalm is also a very, very short psalm. Psalm 123. Again, I lift my eyes to you whose throne is in heaven. As the eyes of a slave look to the hand of her master, as the eyes of a maid look to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till he shows us his mercy. Have mercy on us, O Lord. Have mercy on us. For we have endured much contempt, and we have endured much ridicule from the proud, much contempt from the arrogant. Well, what's the main idea or theme as you read and as you hear the longing of the psalmist? Longing for a nearness to God, right? A song about who we are. Who are we? So the pilgrim meditates on who he or she is to God and who God is to her. And our goal in life is to grow in our understanding of who God is and who we are in relation to him. So, you see there is this wonderful relationship that is, described in this psalm, where we can see God's character as a merciful master the king of all creation, the one who is enthroned in heaven. Yeah. How about the pilgrim's character? How about the pilgrim's character? One who faithfully waits, obeys, and observes the master or the mistress. And one who is meek and willing to endure scorn and contempt. Not complaining, but asking for mercy, asking for help. That is such a wonderful character, isn't it? So often I find myself lacking in that kind of patience when I need to wait. Yeah. So, well, application. Here we see the servant watching, just, observing carefully what the master's hand may beckon him to do, and at the same time pleading for mercy, to endure scorn, to endure hardship from others. So this is a wonderful example of attentiveness, of faithfulness. Let us be patiently waiting and praying to God to move, even if it seems a long wait. Whether it's our petitions for the salvation of our loved ones or for the state of our nation, let us continue to look to God and say, God, you are my master. Show us your favor. This is what Psalm 123, the psalmist says, Lord, show us your favor. Okay, so we've finished the 4 songs, and I hope you continue to enjoy reading the rest of the Psalm of Ascent until our next time we share. And in this last slide, I'd like to leave you a picture again of possibly the Judean hills, where you see the plains right at the bottom, and then the hills. Even as the 4 songs of ascent has encouraged us to continue in this upward journey of increasing maturity in the life of God, maybe we can just pick up one verse from each of the psalm. Okay, so we start from somewhere at the bottom where the plains are. The first verse of Psalm 120, it says, I call on the Lord. Remember, I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. And then we make our next step, we continue, and we progress to 122 Psalm, the first verse. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? I lift up my eyes. And then the next step, I rejoice. I rejoice with those who say to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. And then finally, another one, I lift up my eyes. This time, not to the hills, but I lift up my eyes to my master. That sense of, it almost brings you into that holy of holies, that sense of intimacy with God, knowing him as our master. So maybe be like the psalmists here too. I call, I lift up my eyes, I rejoice, I lift up my eyes. They're like just full of actions, right? Verbs. And so in some ways, so it is also with our Lord God, the great I am, who is constantly doing the good work in us, drawing us, bringing us to complete his work of salvation in us. Yeah. So with that, I would say, may the Lord bless us all. Amen. Back to you, Uncle Henry. Thank you for helping with the slides.